Welcome to Let's Talk Midlife Crisis. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Tracy. We're your go-to hosts for all things midlife, menopause, and moments of pure mayhem.
Whether you're navigating hot flashes, chasing new passions, or just trying to remember why you walked into a room,
we got you. Every week we bring you tips, real-life stories, and expert advice. And we're on WDJY-FM 99.1 Atlanta's own every Monday morning at 9 a.m. So to all our ATL listeners, thank you for tuning in.
So grab your favorite drink and settle in for some laughs and insight. You're in good company.
Let's dive into real talk on Let's Talk Midlife Crisis.
What to do if your partner is having a midlife crisis? So we talk a lot about what, we can do for ourselves when we're experiencing it. But sometimes you're, going through different, even if you're both in your midlife, you and your partner, right, you're having different experiences, right, So it's different for everybody. And we've talked about that. So this is more of just a focus on what you can do to help your partner if they're having a crisis rather than an awakening.
Perfect. Or even a friend, but more exactly. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So
anybody, any loved one. So in 1957, Dr. Elliot Jacques presented a paper to the British Psychoanalytical Society. It was titled Death and the Midlife Crisis. This is kind of some research that he did surrounding this. It was later published in 1965, which is when, the idea of midlife was actually born.
Right.
So it was in the 60s, which really wasn't that long ago. So he actually identified that people in their mid-30s experienced a depressive period marked by symptoms like promiscuity, that's a tough one for me to say, apathy, excessive concern of health and looks, and sometimes a spiritual awakening or an attempt to find themselves. So this was, he was finding that people in their mid-30s were experiencing this.
Right. Which all makes sense, right? All of this.
It does. Yeah. And I think now that sounds kind of young, and I'll get into that. But if you think about the difference in growing up in the 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s versus now, by the time people are in their 30s, they've been married,
right,
for quite some time. Right. They have kids,
right?
And now you don't see that quite as much,
right?
So people are still potentially single or maybe just newly married
or focused,
right? So it's these people at the time in their 30s were in a much different position than a lot of people now in their 30s. So what they found with midlife, and this is some research, this additional research that's been done, it actually really happens now between 45 and 55, which makes more sense based off what I just shared.
Yep.
People wake up and realize their lives are half over.
Yeah.
Potentially.
I remember that for me.
Yeah.
It was scary.
Right. Yeah. And it, again, potentially, that it's not truth. So,
right.
But based off when, my grandparents passed and my great grandparents passed, like their ages, given, I've probably done a lot more things that they never did.
Right, I trust
as far as drugs and alcohol.
Trust my body.
Yeah.
Yes.
So potentially at 46, I could be halfway through my life,
Yeah.
So in the 1990s, researchers started analyzing, there was a huge research that was done called Midlife in the United States. It found that not everyone experiences this. Only 26% of the participants reported an actual crisis.
Okay.
Which is
that's
a lot lower than I thought.
Yeah.
They also found that most happened before 40 or after 50. Which is kind of crazy.
Right.
Out of the 26% that said it was a crisis for them, a vast majority said it was brought on by a major event and not their age.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that being, the death of a loved one, a divorce, health issues, a job change, job loss, whatever, or moving, a big move.
Right.
So that was really what was happening that caused this crisis.
Okay.
Most midlifers are typically healthy, busy social lives, peaks of earnings or, their careers, and satisfied. Most have crises. They're most that do have crises, they're prone to crisis. They're highly neurotic, or they have, a lot of crises throughout their life.
Right.
And so that's typically when they're seeing people that have an actual crisis, that it's something that they were prone to already. Right. Or again, like I said, a big event.
Or maybe something even that happened when they were younger. Because
that
so many
resurfaces.
Things, the Me Too movement brought up all of these suppressed, situations
right.
or feelings.
And I've talked about that too. I recently starting therapy in the last year and doing the EMDR treatments. I've had some like major revelations at age 46 about my childhood.
Right.
So yeah, I can absolutely see that.
Yeah.
The National Bureau of Economic Research analysis in life satisfaction found that happiness starts a gradual decline sometime in your late teens and continues until sometime in your 40s. So your happiness starts to increase again after, potentially between 40 and 50 or after in your 50s.
Okay.
So it's like, I thought that was really strange. Late teens, your happiness starts to decline. But I think that's brought on by a lot of pressure that we get from our parents and society. Society, I've always said it's not fair
peers even
to tell an 18-year-old when they start college that they need to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. Right. That's a lot of pressure, you know. 1.3 billion random people in 51 countries were part of this research they did.
Oh, wow.
So even though the research shows that we get happier again as we age, there's a belief that happiness just declines in a long downward slide the older we get. They always say you're over the hill. It's all downhill,
Right.
So if you're in that happiness slump, you likely think it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And that could definitely spark some midlife crisis, behaviors, like leaving your family for someone younger, or pulling money out of your kid's college account to buy the Porsche that you had your eye on, things like that. That's why you see people making those kinds of rash decisions. So this was really interesting to me. This is kind of where I get into how do you help your partner identify, or how do you identify what's really happening with them? Right. Is it midlife crisis or is it depression? And
hard to tell these days.
I know. And, this is so crazy. This is perfect timing for me to do this topic because, as I mentioned to you earlier, I saw a psychiatrist last week, and she was asking me, it was just an evaluation. And I just kind of felt like, my therapy's been great. It's just not quite enough. I'm in this really weird slump, this like gloom. And I'm, it was election week, so that probably didn't help me too much, but
yes.
So yeah, it was just perfect timing to see her. And they ask you a lot of different questions that, range from what was your childhood like, what, how do you respond to things now? How do and basically they're trying to understand your baseline so they can determine, if you need to be diagnosed or what your diagnosis is and what would help you, to treat your situation. And in her asking me a lot of these questions, one of them was, like physically, how does your anxiety affect you? Are you getting like night sweats? Are you getting, and the things she was listing off, I was like, okay, well, now that I'm thinking about this, yes, I do have those symptoms, but they're not on days where I felt super anxious. So now I'm going, okay, all this time I've been thinking, oh, I'm going through perimenopause. I'm going through, that's why this is happening. That's why, when in reality, I think I'm depressed, and I think it's just temporary, but it's something I'm, trying to work through, obviously. And so it's really probably not perimenopause. However, I am having symptoms because of perimenopause, and I don't really think it's anxiety. So I just kind of started bouncing back and forth and going, what is it?
I think it's so hard to tell.
Yeah.
It's so hard to tell.
I think it is for both men and women, but women especially because of the hormonal changes that we go through. So, according to the CDC in the U.S., women between the ages of 40 and 59 have the highest rates of depression of any group based on age or gender.
I can see that. That just because I don't think I've ever had depression throughout my life, but in my 50s, 40s was, I was still in denial, but 50s I think hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And also because physically, my body started changing with the wrinkles and the skin issues and losing hair.
It's kind of an identity crisis. You know, it's like, I am not the same person physically that I used to be. I'm the same person, but physically I am not.
Right. And looking in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In addition, suicide rates are highest during these years, particularly with white men. In fact, people between the ages of 45 and 54 are more likely to kill themselves than in any other age group.
I would have thought it was young adults.
I feel like I hear that more with young adults as well. But going back to, just thinking about outside of anything that had anything to do with me personally, or people that had to do with me personally, just like seeing, you see headlines on the news, this, middle-aged man killed his kids and his wife and himself. And
right.
Like, you see stuff like that. And so I'm like, you know what? That probably, it's probably actually very true. I mean, it is. They did research on it. Most people have the stereotype in their head of someone who can't get out of bed, who can't find joy anywhere in life. Although there are certainly some people who fit that description, many depressed people are active members of their community. You see them running the bake sale at school, showing up to work every day.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest.
Yeah.
I think what happens behind closed doors, and I always told my kids that when they were little, just because so-and-so seems to have it all, you never know what's happening with them at home. So be compassionate and be kind.
Yeah. Or even with, the kid that's bullying at school.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going on in his home.
Right.
We don't know what his life is like. Right. So try to be kind, even though they're not. I've always told my kids that, like, be the better person. You don't know what their life is like.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So this is based upon men and women, correct?
Yes. This good research that the CDC did was based on men and women in midlife.
Because if you're going through menopause and your spouse is also going through a midlife crisis, that could be quite a lot going on in your household.
Yeah.
For a partner that you've been with for many, many years.
Right. And I'll get into the conversations that you can have together.
Okay, good.
And the things to look for, even if it's not something you want to bring up to your partner, but stuff to really look for.
Right.
And then maybe, recommend, things or just even your insight. But, so midlife is a normal stage of life. We all go through it. What if instead of calling it a midlife crisis, we call it a midlife transition? We've talked about an awakening, what if it's just something to be expected and not feared?
Trying to embrace it's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, all adults go through a series of stages as they age, and that's what the midlife transition is. It's just another stage of life.
Yeah.
It makes sense that during these midlife years, people would be evaluating where they are in life.
I was just thinking that. Yeah, for the people that had very high aspirations for themselves when they were younger. Mm-hmm. Whereas I felt like I didn't have high aspirations for myself. So now looking back, we've talked about this.
Right.
I think, young Tracy would probably be proud of me.
I did pretty damn good.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think it depends also a lot on where you are in your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Financial, finances have so much to do with everything.
They do. And especially I think at this point in your life, because I think we've talked about this before. I feel like up until this part of my life, I was striving to create a lifestyle and provide for my family in the way that I wanted that, like my vision of that. And now my kids are gone. Although we could get into the economy and how they can barely afford to live on their own, so I'm still helping them.
Right.
But I don't have that same responsibility. I choose to.
Yes. At
this point, because they're all adults now, I choose to continue to help them. But it's not something I'm not putting food on the table for them necessarily, or putting a roof over their head. And so now it's like, okay, I need to evaluate things and say, okay, am I putting enough money away for my future so that I can retire?
Retirement. Yeah.
Am I doing the things that I want to do? like you want to travel.
Yes.
You know, we both bought houses.
I was going to say.
Yeah. So
and
things
so
like
people
that.
haven't purchased a home, because now it's almost unattainable with, the cost of homes and the interest rates, going up. But what's funny about the interest rate is when I bought my first house, it was actually a condo, but the interest rates were in the double digits.
Oh yeah. That was just the way it was.
It was the way it was. So now to say, oh, interest rates are up, they're actually still much lower than my first house. But a lot of people don't have the opportunity to purchase their own home.
Well, and the problem too is that the cost of the real estate has gone up so much. So, back when I bought my first house, I don't even know if I was 30 yet. I might have been 30. I don't think so. There's no way in a million years I could have afforded anything over $300,000.
Yeah.
No way.
Right.
I mean, and interest rates, I think my interest rate was like around 4 point something. It was very low. And now that same house that I bought and paid $235,000 for, I guarantee you it's worth $600,000 or $700,000. It was a 5-bedroom house. It's a huge house.
I couldn't afford to buy my home now. If I hadn't bought it years ago, I wouldn't be able to afford it.
It's absolutely crazy. So that's just compounded the situation. Yeah. And it was always an aspiration for me to buy my own home. And luckily I was able to at a young age, but that's just unheard of now for kids.
And that's just one of many things that you can aspire to do.
Right.
Maybe you wanted to go back to school or finish your education, or
a lot of people in midlife go back to get their master's or PhD. Yeah. So how do you know if it's actually a crisis?
Magic question.
Yes. Yeah. So these are things to, and this, obviously you can do this evaluation on yourself too, but these are things to kind of look for with your partner or your friend, family member. Apathy is one of the most common signs. You just feel blah about everything on an ongoing basis. It might be difficult to get yourself motivated or to feel really happy with things that you used to enjoy. Again, this is where it ties into, is this like a midlife thing, or am I actually depressed?
Yes.
Resentment and blame, the feeling of that. Maybe you're starting to resent having to cook meals every night for your family, or the assumption that you'll continue to be the primary breadwinner. Yes. That's a lot of weight to have on yourself.
It's a lot of weight.
Your thoughts are continually coming back to, what's in it for me? This isn't fair, or I'm so tired of this.
Yes.
The future doesn't look good. If you're looking to your future and all you see is more of the same feeling of monotony, you might be in a midlife crisis mode. Maybe you're regretting past decisions. You don't see a way forward that isn't bleak. Why didn't I start saving for retirement earlier?
Yes, that's me.
Are you filled with the feelings of regret, or how you've lived your life or decisions you've made thus far? And again, these are conversations that you can have with your loved one. Ask them these questions, or maybe they're just vocalizing it and you pay attention. Right. Pay attention to what they're saying.
Yeah. Or try to open those lines of communication.
Exactly. Yeah. Ask the questions. A lot of jealousy. Are you looking around and thinking everyone else has it better than you? Or maybe you keep wanting to live someone else's life, or you're always jealous of your partner and thinking they have a better life than you do.
I think that's the American way.
I know. Grass is always greener.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what they say.
And the envy and jealousy of those who have more than you.
Yeah.
Material things have become so important.
Yeah, it's really sad.
And status, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Making impulsive and reckless decisions. Are you quitting your job or asking for a divorce without thinking past the next few hours?
Right. Right.
Are you spending money on things you can't afford without thinking of long-term consequences? In other words, are you trying to do things to avoid your current reality and create a new one quickly?
I did that a lot.
Yeah.
I want a different life. I remember that. I remember one time when I quit my old job, which I was there for 15 years, but I had left twice and came back. Wow, and one of those times I remember just walking out the door and thinking, I want a different life. I want
a quick change.
I want a different life. So the boyfriend was gone, new job. But a year later, I wasn't happy. Went back to the old job and the old boyfriend. But then I still wasn't happy, and I felt like, you're just settling. But I definitely get that. I get that.
I get it too. Consistent boredom or restlessness. This is linked to feelings of apathy. Is nothing pleasing to you right now? Do you notice you're feeling bored or restless often? Even doing things you used to enjoy. This was something that I kind of thought about too in my evaluation with my psychiatrist. I think this is common for people who grow up with a lot of chaos. And you get to a point in your life and it's like, I think some people create chaos when there isn't any.
Yes.
Because they're bored.
There are definitely personalities of people that do that.
Yeah.
Whether it's in your professional life or in your personal life.
Right. Yeah. And so, and I don't feel like I'm one of those people, but I think that a lot of the thought processes I have sometimes are because of that. It's like my life is too good right now, or boring, quote unquote.
Right.
So I start having these thought processes that create chaos for myself. And so I'm not necessarily creating it like situations, but it's in my head, you know? And that was kind of a revelation that I had in having that evaluation. But it really made me think about it. And when I did this, and, you know, found these points, I thought, okay, I resonate with that in some form, you know? You start questioning everything. Are you asking a lot of big questions like, what's my life's purpose? Is this all there is? Am I doing the right things with my life? Do you feel like it's hard to decide what you should be doing next?
Fulfillment, yeah.
Right. So if, you know, these are things that you're seeing within yourself or your loved one, what do? First of all, don't label it. We've been talking about midlife, depression. Don't label it. Even if you're sure your partner's having a midlife crisis, do not label it. Okay. It's not your job, and it generally will put people on the defense when we label them. Yeah. So it's not
just really... like the period, right?
Right. You never say, it's that time of the month. Yeah. It's not helpful.
I can understand that. Yeah, just don't label it. Yeah.
So instead, this is what you want to do. You want to be curious. You want to ask a lot of questions without being sure you know the answer. Don't try to drive them to a solution that you've already decided on. Instead, ask questions to figure out together what steps might happen next.
Okay.
Don't sack. That's SAC. This is not a time for offering suggestions, giving advice, or criticizing. Oh, I like that. I'm going to use that. Sack. Don't sack me.
Okay.
Really listen to them. Provide a non-judgmental space to allow your partner to talk about their feelings and why they're upset. Check yourself. Your own fear is going to come up during this process. You don't need to be continually checking in with yourself, or you do need to make sure you're coming from love and not fear.
Right.
Be loving, open, patient, compassionate, kind. Don't be worried and obsessive and anxious and overbearing and codependent or withdrawn. Really be genuine in that you have concerns and you want to work through this together, and you are there to support them 100%, not to judge, not to solve it on your own, you know, come up with your own idea of what's happening to them. This is a journey that you can go on together.
Yeah. And not judging is super important, but it's also super hard to do.
It is.
Super hard to do.
Yeah.
I think for most people. For me, but I would have to guess for most people.
Yeah, because there's this stigma around midlife. You know, there's a stigma around depression.
Right.
And so it's easy to just immediately go, oh, this is what it is, and start going, you know, well, this is what you need to do. You need to get help. No, don't go there. And I'll tell you when you should, if you should. So help them. Tip number 2 is help them focus on purpose.
Okay.
When you're asking these wonderful questions and listening non-judgmentally, you can then move into helping your partner focus on their bigger purpose. A recent study from the British Psychological Society found that people who experienced a quarter or of midlife crisis and became super focused on their purpose in life, they were able to come up with creative solutions to get them through this challenging time.
Oh.
So it's really, and that can be different things for people.
Right.
It can be going back to church. Maybe you grew up going to church and you didn't go most of your adult life.
Right.
You know,
or took a long hiatus.
Yeah. And like you said, it could be, you know, finding the right job. It could be, some people wait a long time to have kids. So they're almost 40. Some women in their 40s have kids. You know, there's different things that help people find their purpose.
And not everybody is easily open to discussing it.
Right.
Maybe I'm gravitated towards maybe men, right? So if you're, trying to communicate with your, husband or, male partner, and they don't want to communicate, that's different too.
Absolutely.
Right?
And we've talked about a lot of the differences that men and women experience, and based off research, women tend to, as they're going through these physical changes and thinking about life, tend to get more depressed.
Right.
Men tend to get more angry. So
Makes sense.
Yeah. So that and a lot of times, when you're depressed or angry, you don't want to talk. You don't want to talk about it.
Right.
So that's where I come in with tip number 3.
Okay.
Get help.
There you go.
Once you've asked the questions and listened, you can be in a position to offer a suggestion. And the only one that you really should make is to suggest that your partner gets professional help to work through the time. And some people don't want to hear that either.
Right.
But
some people have a negative stigma against, getting help.
Oh my gosh, I think everyone should have a therapist.
Yeah. I know.
And that's a safe space to talk to someone. That's not because you
get maybe good advice.
Absolutely.
Instead of talking to, no offense, but talking to your best friend or talking,
right.
I don't have all the answers for you.
And
I want to be there to support you.
Biased too.
Right.
Right. Therapist
Unbiased.
is not biased.
Yeah. True.
And they can give you professional advice. They can give you personal advice based off what they've learned about you and what they know about you.
And guidance on how to move forward.
And a lot of times you're telling this person things about you that you've never told anyone else.
Right.
Right. So it's a safe space. It's not, I hate that there's such a stigma around it, because you don't have to be mentally ill to get therapy.
Right.
You don't.
I think though we're coming a long ways into opening up to the thought and the possibilities of accepting therapy
Absolutely.
or counseling. But I still feel, and maybe it's with the older generation, which would be now in menopause and midlife, that they have those negative associations with it. But I also hope that we're coming along and
I agree.
Becoming more open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing a psychiatrist to be assessed for depression, like I did, meeting with a counselor for even a few sessions. You don't have to go to therapy forever.
Nope.
If you just want to go for 2 months, go for 2 months.
Right.
And quite honestly, it's very rare to find one that you really connect with on your first visit. I mean, sometimes you have to go to a couple different ones.
It's tough.
So
it's tough.
But, sometimes a lot of people get lucky. I got lucky this time. I love my therapist.
Yeah. I like mine. I haven't been lately, but I know she's just a text away.
Yeah.
If I need her. But we were able to kind of click.
Work through stuff.
She provided tangible things to help.
Right.
Which I thought was very impressive, because that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
I mean, it's one thing to sit there. Exactly.
The tools.
It's one thing to sit there and just talk and then feel heard, or for lack of a better term, vent, if you will.
Absolutely.
But I was looking for those tools.
Yeah.
And just more tangible things to take away from it. And she caught that on right. She caught on right away and provided those.
That's amazing.
To me. So, yeah.
You can also, if you're religious, consult your rabbi, your priest, whatever holy person.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
We got rabbi on the line.
They'll listen, and you can get comfort from just, again, having someone to vent to.
Yeah.
Make an appointment for a physical. Maybe something, you need some blood work done. Maybe there's something off with your hormones. And then the last tip, take care of yourself. There's nothing better, never been a better time for, you taking care of yourself. And then when your partner is struggling, you can help take care of them.
Exactly.
Make sure you're getting enough rest, you're eating well, you're exercising, all the stuff that we've talked about.
And laughter, exercising
Absolutely.
and laughter, endorphins. We need those. We just need those.
Absolutely. And, there's a lot of things too, I think, as couples that you kind of fall away from later in your relationship. And that's just being friends.
Yeah.
Running errands together.
Right.
Or doing some weird date that you wouldn't normally do, like just going thrifting.
Or getting to know each other again after becoming empty nesters.
Right.
And you don't have those children there.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
huge as well.
Yeah. Well, that wraps it up for today. Thanks for joining us on Let's Talk Midlife Crisis. We hope you got some laughs, a little inspiration, and maybe a few new ideas.
If you loved today's episode, hit the subscribe button. And hey, share the love. Send this episode to a friend who could use a good laugh and some midlife wisdom.
Please also connect with us on social media at Let's Talk Midlife Crisis and let us know what's on your mind. We love hearing from you.
Until next time, keep thriving, keep laughing, and keep embracing every crazy, wonderful minute of this midlife adventure.